Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. In today's video we're going to talk about the rejected takeoff and I'm going to demonstrate the maneuver to you. Let's start with actually reviewing some reasons to reject the takeoff. We are distinguishing the takeoff into two different segments, the low speed segment and the high speed segment. The low speed segment is all the way to 80 knots. And above 80 knots we are in the high speed segment. The danger of a runway excursion increases exponentially once we are in the high speed rejected takeoff regime. So runway excursion is one of the big things that we have to take into account thinking about the rejected takeoff, especially in combination with an engine failure. But the majority of runway excursions is actually happening at the end of the runway with a rejected takeoff. Therefore, it is very important to apply maximum braking or verify operation of the RTO auto brakes until stopping on the runway is absolutely assured. You need to use all available stopping aids. That includes maximum reverse thrust, speed brakes, and of course the wheel brakes. So let's now review the reasons why we would reject the takeoff. In the low speed segment, so before 80 knots, we would reject the takeoff for any master caution activation, for any system failure, unusual noise or vibration, tire failure, abnormally slow acceleration, takeoff configuration warning, for any RAS, takeoff flap or taxiway warning, for fire warning, engine failure, predictive wind shear warning, if a side window opens, or if the airplane is unable or unsafe to fly. Above 80 knots we are only going to reject for fire warning, engine failure, predictive wind shear warning, aircraft unable or unsafe to fly. So above 80 knots is only those 4 points for which we are going to reject the takeoff. Fire warning, engine failure, predictive wind shear warning, airplane unsafe or unable to fly. The latter point, airplane unsafe or unable to fly, gives the captain a little bit of a discretion as to what is safe and what is not. For example, if you are just about at V1 on a very short runway and you get an airspeed unreliable situation, would you reject or would you continue? You have to keep in mind, normally being go-minded is the right course of action, because any runway that's behind you is not going to help you. So if you are to reject a takeoff, then any runway behind you is not usable for you. Whereas if you take the airplane into the air, do a traffic pattern, come back and land, you have the full runway available. So take that into consideration when you are deciding whether it's safe or unsafe to fly the airplane. I will also at this point out that there is a great video available by Boeing that I'm going to link to in the description of the video on the rejected takeoff decision. Now let's go on and review the actions that we have to take as pilots when we are rejecting the takeoff. The captain is going to call stop and takes control of the airplane. Even if the first officer was pilot flying, the captain is going to take control of the airplane. He will simultaneously close the thrust lever and disengage the auto throttle. Disengaging the auto throttle is important, because especially in the low speed regime, when you're still in N1 mode on the auto throttle might just push the thrust levers right back up when you have pulled them into the idle position. So that's important, to disconnect the auto throttle. Verify operation of the RTO auto brakes or manually apply maximum braking. Raise the speed brake lever and apply maximum reverse thrust consistent with the runway conditions. Stop the aircraft on the runway or consider turning into the wind in case the takeoff has been rejected due to a fire, and when the aircraft comes to a stop, set the parking brake. The first officer is going to verify all items for the reject have been actioned by the captain and is going to call out any emissions. Note the brakes on speed. That's important, especially in the low speed regime if you have rejected for some master caution. It might have been something not so important, but you have and you will be able to go straight away again. But the brakes will probably require some cooling. That's why it's important for the first officer to note the brakes on speed. And he's going to call out 100 knots, 80 knots, 60 knots and call auto brake disarm. The latter is important again. When you have to reject the takeoff, it might happen that the captain starts applying manual braking, causing the auto brake to disengage. But then he might remember, oh, I wanted to use my auto brakes, and might go off the brake pedal again. That's why the first officer has to call out auto brake disarm. When you're approaching the runway end, the runway centerline lights are going to change color. At 900 meters from the end, you will get alternating red and white lights, and they will become steady red with 300 meters remaining, so the first officer will have to call those out. Once the parking brake has been set, he will select flaps 40 and inform ATC of the aborted takeoff and include the airplane position in that. The selection of flap 40 is because in case an evacuation becomes necessary, then the passengers will be able to slide down the flaps. And it is taking quite a bit of time for the flaps to extend. Therefore, the first officer is always going to select flaps 40 once the parking brake has been set on any rejected takeoff maneuver. Alright, that much for the theory. Let's quickly go over the emergency briefing that we are doing on the first flight of every day. So, from the captain. Above 80 knots, I will only reject the takeoff for engine fire or fire warning, engine failure, predictive wind shear warning, aircraft is unsafe or unable to fly. Before V1, if I called stop, I will simultaneously close the thrust levers and disengage the auto throttle. Apply maximum manual braking or verify operation of the RTO or auto brakes. Manually raise the speed brake lever. Apply maximum reverse thrust and stop the aircraft. I will set the parking brake. Now comes the first officer's part. Let's quickly head over to the right hand seat for that. If you call stop, I will note the brakes on speed, call speed brakes up or speed brakes not up, call thrust reverse normal or abnormal indications. Verify your actions are complete and call in emissions. Call 100 knots, 80 knots, 60 knots and runway distance remaining. Call auto brake disarm, select flaps 40 when the parking brake has been set, inform ATC of the reject. Now we continue from the captain's side. We will identify the failure and carry out any drills as appropriate. If we decide to evacuate the aircraft, we will read into the evacuation checklist. If time permits, I will pull the cockpit voice recorder circuit breaker. And this concludes the RTO part of the emergency briefing. So with all of this set and done, let's start in the airplane. I have programmed an engine failure to occur just before V1. And note that since we're in a single pilot environment in Microsoft Flight Simulator, I'm slightly going to modify the SOP to include some of the first officer's actions in my flow as the captain here in the simulator. Alright, so enough theory, you've been waiting for it, here we go. Timing. Stabilized. Set takeoff thrust. Takeoff thrust set, indications normal. Checked. Stop. Mayday, 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 PMDG 737 stopping at 2/3 down the runway. Okay, state malfunction. So, we have an engine problem. It's showing 0 and 1. We are showing the engine fail flag, 0 and 2. I would say this is a severe damage on engine number 1. Okay, I agree. Engine severe damage memory items. Auto throttle if engaged, disengage. Thrust lever engine number 1, confirmed closed. 1, confirmed closed. Engine start lever engine number 1, confirmed, cut off. Engine fire switch engine number 1, confirmed. Override and pull. If a fire light illuminates, that is not the case. Okay, that's our engine severe damage memory items complete. So this concludes the rejected takeoff maneuver, together with the engine severe damage memory items, since the engine severe damage is what led to our rejected takeoff. From here on, the crew would then evaluate if any further actions, such as an evacuation, are necessary. And here it would also be determined if the airplane is able to continue taxiing off the runway. For example, you might have rejected the takeoff only because the door light showed. So in that case, you would be able to vacate the runway, and then probably taxi right back to the holding point, and with sufficient brake cooling be able to go once the cabin crews have ensured that the door has been closed properly. So you can see, the maneuver is not too complex, but there is quite a little bit of theory that you have to keep in mind, and that is something you should have in mind for every single takeoff you do, because one day the unexpected is going to happen. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to see you on any future video.